This is an essay I wrote summarizing Phil Callahan's Ancient Mysteries, Modern Visions. Ancient Mysteries, Modern Visions is the work of Callahan's research into the magnetic life of agriculture. He joined the U.S. Air Force and was trained in navigational communications. After the war, he would rebuild radio towers. Callahan would go on to earn his BA and MA Masters in Ornithology from the University of Arkansas and PhD in Entomology from Kansas State University. After having studied birds, insects, and how they function, specifically how insects use their antennae to interact with the forces around them, he noticed that the shape of these antennae aid its function and that much of our modern-day religious structures follow the same shapes, implying that the function of these religious structures may be similar to that of the insect's antenna. Callahan would also study the paramagnetic effects of minerals found in soil and stone structures, which would prove to be, unbeknownst to the general public, the reason for positive outcomes in biological life. After his U.S. Army Air Force training, Callahan was stationed in Ireland, where he would notice many stone round towers. The reason these stone round towers were built and their function are not clear. Quote from page 4, "If not defensive sanctuary, then exactly why were these towers built? They were not a passing fancy of some mystic crackpots. Not only are they aesthetically pleasing, but over a third of them have been standing for over 1,400 years or more. One thing is clear. The group of people most likely responsible for the towers seem to be the Celts. They, the Celts, were in fact Europe's most innovative and technologically oriented agriculturalists." On page 3, he goes on to say, "The Romans finally drove the Celts into Wales, a corner of Britain, but never did defeat them, the Celts, in Ireland. From the 1st to the 8th century, when the Viking raids began in force, Ireland was left by and large to itself. It was during the 7th century that most of the elegant round towers of Ireland were built." When looking at the front cover of Professor Barrow's pamphlet on round towers, which was a map of Ireland that showed all round towers still standing, about 68, Callahan noticed that the round towers formed a star map of the northern night sky, while showing a special interest in the Draco constellation, as did the Egyptians. In Callahan's belief, a key fact connecting the Irish-Scottish to the ancient Egyptians. Page 10. There are as many square towers scattered around Ireland as round towers. They are called tower houses, or castellated houses, and were the fortified residence of the Irish and Anglo rulers of Ireland. The square towers came long after the round towers and were of normal origin. Built in the 12th century, every Irish tower house tested, 15, proved to be built of paramagnetic stone, whereas the cottar or farm houses tested were all diamagnetic. And from page 23, paramagnetism describes substances that have a type of electron configuration in their atomic orbitals that make them weakly magnetic. Throughout Callahan's research into paramagnetic material, he noticed that shape determines function and that cone-shaped objects made of the right material will have stronger paramagnetic properties than that same material shaped in other non-coned ways. He noted the Victorian dunce hat put on children who have trouble learning, witch's hat, Indian teepees, and of course, pyramids. Callahan decided to create a small replica model of the round towers to study its function. He created it out of carborundum, silicon carbide, of crystal set frame to act as an antenna and rectifier rolled in one. The cylindrical round tower model attached to and suspended from a string would not be attracted to the powerful magnet next to the model. That is until he shaped the tip of the cylinder into a cone, causing the coned end to gravitate towards the powerful magnet, confirming his theory that shape does increase paramagnetic effects. In page 27, Callahan writes, "In my literature review, I discovered that of the 64 standing towers, 25 were built of limestone and 13 of sandstone. The rest were built of basalt or basalt, clay, slate, or granite, all minerals that we might expect to have paramagnetic properties. Much of the sandstone in Ireland is red sandstone, indicating a low concentration of iron." On page 28, he goes on to say, "If we look in Dana's Manual of Mineralogy, we find that sandstone is a sedimentary stone composed of grains of sand bound together by carbonate, iron oxide, in parentheses hematite or goethite, or argillaceous clay materials. Hematite, iron, which is iron oxide, or Fe2O3, is a natural magnetic substance widely distributed in rocks all over the world." During his travels to and inquiry into Egypt, Callahan learned that not a single mummy was found inside the chambers. He came to believe that the Great Pyramids were likely Egyptian cathedrals, a place where the priests would go to practice their Egyptian faith. He would study the way the stone was stacked inside the pyramid chambers and compared the structure to the Gothic cathedral, Chedi of Thailand, round towers, pagoda, and other religious forms. Callahan's experience as a young entomologist proved useful in studying religious structures. On page 42, he writes, "I labored long and hard to describe the antenna sensilla, in parentheses spines, on the corn earworm moth antenna. I had to make thousands of embedded wax slides and use a light microscope in order to put the microscopic shapes together in my mind. In the last 25 years, I have seen the shape of every religious structure I ever visited in my walk in the sun, and each an exact miniature on the antenna of an insect. I realized many years ago that insect sensilla, which is their spines, which are micrometer in size, must resonate in micrometer-long electromagnetic waves, that is, infrared waves at room or life temperatures. I also realized that the shapes of ancient religious structures must have some practical rationale other than the vague religious symbolism that we technocrats attribute to them in our ignorance." Callahan goes on to write on page 46, "Since religious structures of stone are doped with traces of various paramagnetic elements, as is the waxy exoskeleton of insects, it was only a short step for me to model different shapes and coat them with paramagnetic minerals or beeswax. I deduced that if plants are diamagnetic, then animal matter, such as the human body, should be paramagnetic. It was also evident from my study of insect sensilla, which is their spines, that species of insects that detect animal matter, like flies, mosquitoes, ants, etc., seem to have a goodly number of corrugated sensilla on their antenna." Callahan would also note the rejuvenating effect he experienced by climbing a religious structure in India. On page 46, he writes, I remember hiking across the flat plain of India with my friend. We were tired, but when we reached the mysterious Qutb Minar, the Red Tower of Delhi, we decided to climb its steps to the balcony at the top. It was a strange ascent, for the expected fatigue of my already tired body seemed to absorb into the corrugated sandstone inner walls of the beautiful structure. It was as if the very weight of my body had lightened and new energy was infused into my being. Somewhat the same infusion occurs, but not as strongly, if one sits quietly in an Irish round tower. Callahan would note this effect in his attempt to explain why some enjoy rock climbing and hiking up mountains, to feel the bliss that comes with interacting with the paramagnetic energy stored in stones sitting in high elevations. On page 50, he writes, It is my firm belief that the infrared paramagnetic forces radiate from the towers in waves from their base and increase the paramagnetic properties of the surrounding soil. The pre-Aztec pyramid of the sun outside Mexico City is built from volcanic rock and is highly paramagnetic. I have tested it. Callahan also quotes Jesus' words in the Essenes Gospel of Peace. On page 55, Callahan writes, quoting Jesus, And there were many sick among them, tormented with grievous pains, and they crawled to Jesus' feet. They asked, Tell us what we shall do. Jesus replied, and he pointed with his hand to where the running of the water and sun's heat had softened to clayed mud, the earth by the edge of water. Sink your feet in the mire, that the embrace of the angel of earth may draw out from your bones all uncleanness and all disease, and you will see Satan and your pains fly from the embrace of the angel of earth. Callahan would prove Jesus' advice to be true. As Philip continued to write, The summer before we went to Egypt, my wife developed a cyst on the top of her instep. The doctor advised surgery. I ground up some volcanic rock and clay from an old flower pot. She wore it over her instep in a cloth bandage for a week, and the cyst disappeared. Of course, my degree is PhD, not MD, so I certainly did not cure her. God did that through the intercession of paramagnetic stone and clay. In conclusion, I'll refer to one more quote from Callahan's Ancient Mysteries and Modern Visions. From page 117, he writes, If my farming friends learn one thing from all of my observations in this book, it is, I would hope, that if their soil does not contain strong paramagnetic force, they will not be able to grow a healthy plant regardless of how much junk they pour into the land. Good eco-agriculture leads to healthy plants, and once that state is achieved down on the farm, then insects and disease problems will take care of themselves. As I have roamed about between the U.S., Ireland, and Egypt, studying towers, pyramids, rocks, and soils, I have become more and more astonished by the simple fact that the same forces that have levitated loving persons, and also that loving persons most often utilized to heal the sick, are the same forces, magnetic and electric, that cause a tiny seed to grow into a corn plant or even into a giant loblolly pine outside of my kitchen door. It is almost as if God has an algebra equation for life. Love plus electromagnetic energy equals life. Below is a picture of Phil Callahan's interview with his good friend Joe Blankenship. Callahan holding a statue of the Virgin Mary filled with paramagnetic rock.